Over the summer of 1994, a still unexplained phenomena struck the small town of Oakville, Washington state. Blobs around the size of a grain of rice and mistaken for hail fell from the sky. They were gelatinous, translucent, like small pieces of jelly. They fell a total of 6 separate times.
And we both looked at each other and we said, geez, this isn't right. I mean, we're out in the middle of nowhere, basically, and where did this come from?
Strangely, people who touched or came in close contact with the blobs got sick.
I got sick, my wife got sick, my daughter, everybody that lived here got sick.
And the whole town came down with like a flu, only it was a really hard flu. It didn't last like 7 days, it lasted like 7 weeks to 2 or 3 months.
She had extreme vertigo. She complained that she had difficulty with her vision. Her vision was blurry.
So what actually happened?
Oakville is a small town on the west coast of Washington state in America. When it's on the coast, it's actually about 40 miles inland. The first case was the 7th of August 1994. There was what the locals said was a storm, so a lot of rain. I'd imagine in a place where it rains a lot, when they say it was a lot of rain, it's probably a lot of rain. When the rain stopped, there were tiny little jelly-like clear blobs on tops of the roofs. One lady said that she found them all over the chicken coop, because obviously the chicken coop's low, so she could see them on top of the chicken coop. Some of the people got ill with flu-like symptoms. Some of the older people had to go into hospital. There's a cases of cattle dying and cats and pets dying. And the locals think that these things are connected. The local people think that they were made ill by handling these weird little clear gelatinous blobs that fell out of the sky. But it did happen more than once, which is one of the things I think when you look at it sort of skeptically, did it really happen? Well, yeah, it did really happen, and it happened multiple times in that month, in subsequent rain showers.
Well, I have to say that as a microbiologist, you're trained to look for things that are invisible. Really, that's why we're called microbiologists. We need microscopes to do our work, to look at microorganisms. In other words, things you can't see.
One of the main protagonists in the story, she collected samples. She was some kind of health, public health worker. So she collected some samples. And so they did do tests on the samples.
There are contemporaneous reports of microbes being found in the blobs. Some people thought that there is perhaps a human cell, but then they found there was no nucleus in it, so it wasn't a human cell. But here's the problem. When all that work was done, and people did work on it, they didn't keep the samples. Now, we don't know why we don't have the samples today. This kind of a work, you would usually try and keep them in a lab somewhere, or perhaps replicate them so other people could do the work and to check, but we don't have them. So poor microbiologists of today can't check it.
Adding to the conspiracy, the samples, according to the doctor who was testing them, were taken from his lab. No other samples in the whole time he worked there were taken from the lab. People were interviewed by men in black, according to the locals.
Just to say, the scientific method is very careful. It requires the results to be written very meticulously by you, shared with other people. Anyway, that's one of the things that you can take out of this whole story, is just the demands of the scientific method if we're going to get something useful out of the end product.
So what could this be? Here are the theories.
So one of the theories is that somehow jellyfish got ground up and dropped all over the countryside. There are cases of frog spawn, fish eggs, small fish, things like that being dropped out of storms, because you can have really warm air sucking things. Big storms can suck things out of the ocean that are small enough to be carried. They can be carried in the gusty winds and dropped on the coast. So that is something that happens, especially in very stormy places next to big oceans, which this place is. So that all makes sense. that could happen. Why the jellyfish would be in pieces, I don't know. Some people have said that they are also possibly algae. That's quite a good explanation for it, that it's a type of algae, because blue-green algae does make you feel ill but doesn't kill you, but it does kill things like cats and dogs. So that would explain people being a bit ill, but it killing animals but not killing humans. The only additional explanation that people give, which is just ridiculous, is that it was frozen waste falling out of planes, which the FIA obviously say no, because we don't drop waste on land in America. And it's meant to be blue. It has blue chemicals in it. The stuff that landed on the floor wasn't blue. And it seems to me like the least believable one. I'm far more likely to believe that some kind of algae was picked up by a storm and dumped on the land than it fell out of commercial planes. But then there are the more exciting possibilities, which are that the government were messing around and testing things in the nearby ocean, and that's what made people ill. There are cases of the American government experimenting on its own population. The one that applies to this situation, there was a case in the Second World War called Operation Sea Spray, which happened in San Francisco, where the Americans wanted to know if Japan released biological weapons in the Bay Area of San Francisco, would it spread all over San Francisco and kill everybody? So they wanted to know whether it's possible, whether they needed to worry about it. They basically they released a harmless biological agent, if you like, and then they went and checked where they could find it on things. And it basically proved that yes, if somebody sprays anthrax into the air, it will kill everybody in San Francisco. But what they didn't know in 1942, or whenever it is that they did it, during the Second World War, was that actually, if you're poorly already, those bacteria can actually kill you. I think one person died, about 6 or 7 people got ill, so it wasn't like an enormous catastrophe of multiple deaths, but it still looks like maybe that happened. But they say it didn't. To this day, the government says no, they just died, it was a coincidence. That was unintentional. They didn't kill people on purpose. They didn't intend to not kill anybody, but they did do an experiment on the population of San Francisco that went slightly wrong. So this is where we get to what happened maybe in Oakville, is that there is a theory that the blobs were practicing delivering a biological agent. And so the blobs were a delivery system for dropping something poisonous on an area, and they wanted to see if it would work. But the reason why that's important from a sort of moral point of view is that Richard Nixon signed the decree that no one would use biological weapons, nobody would test them, nobody would create biological weapons, nobody would use biological weapons in the whole world. You're not allowed to. If it was actually the government doing that, it's super illegal. But if the people are telling the truth that lived in that village, they happened. The blobs definitely landed. People turned up and started asking them questions. It all looks quite fishy if it's just some blue-green algae that landed out of the sky. It's not so much that did it happen, it's what are they? And did they make people ill, or is that a coincidence? Did they kill some cattle, or is that a coincidence? Did they kill some pets? Is that a coincidence? And the idea that any government, not just the American government, but any government doesn't do things like this is ridiculous. Of course they do. Most of the time they try to just do it to stay ahead of the game, to be ahead of the competitors, to be prepared for war and so on and so forth. They are doing it in their best interest, but they are a military organisation, so their best interests are based around doing harm to other people before they do harm to you. So it's not a nice business.
The Oakville Blobs are still a mystery. With key evidence confiscated, finding meaningful answers seems unlikely. Any further investigation would mean digging for information buried by the hands of government agents, leaving us with the unsettling reminder that some truths are locked away from ordinary citizens, supposedly for our own good.